recorded at Get a Grip Studios in Toronto, Canada, a Get a Grip management production and in association with the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast. Financially supported by the good folks at the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, this is Restoring Darkness podcast.
This episode of Restoring Darkness is brought to you by Evluma. If you're serious about contributing to the reduction of light pollution, go to evluma.com, hover over products, and click on Dark Sky Friendly Lighting. Both the OmniMax and AreaMax lights are International Dark Sky Association certified. The warmer color temperatures of the OmniMax reduce the more easily scattered blue wavelengths, which contribute to glare and sky glow. With AreaMax lights, you get full cutoff, which also means no uplight and a significantly reduced contribution to sky glow. And all of Evluma's outdoor lighting product lines come with dimmable drivers for even more control. If your customer is looking for dark sky-friendly fixtures with energy savings while still meeting the demands of decorative lighting, look no further than Evluma. Evluma, illuminating the pursuit of dark skies.
Welcome to the Restoring Darkness podcast. Today I'm with Jesse Barber. He completed his BS and MS at the University of Wyoming and his PhD at Wake Forest University, before spending 5 years with the National Park Service's Natural Sound and Night Skies Division for his postdoctoral work. He runs the Sensory Ecology Lab at Boise State University. There's some scholars there that are dedicated to understanding how sensory environments and sensory pollution impact birds, bats, and insects. Welcome to the show, Jesse.
Great to be here.
You've used some term. So I don't like, and I've said this before, and I love the great work the International Dark Skies Association does. So not being critical of that institution, but I don't like the term dark skies. I feel like it's inaccurate. So we use the terminology restoring darkness incrementally where there is heavy light pollution and the preservation of night where it exists. That's the kind of way we want to describe what we're trying to do. But I've never heard the night skies division. I like that term. And then this idea of sensory pollution. Can you explain that term to me, sensory pollution?
Yeah. It's sort of couching light and noise in the same ways we've been thinking about chemistry for a long time. It's pretty close to your recouching of night skies, that we think about pollution as often being parts per million, that there is this dose of pollutant that causes problems. And light and noise work in the same way, that a little bit can be bad for some organisms, for some human biological functions. And as you get more and more pollutants, you get more and more effects.
I think at the risk of, creating competition where maybe it's not appropriate, I often compare what we're doing to the climate change movement, right? And I know this is the darkness restoration movement or whatever, but I find their metrics a bit crude. Like the carbon metric, that's all you're looking at or whatever. When it comes to pollution, there's a lot of things that cause pollution that are not easily measured in a ton of carbon, or and for light pollution, we have very difficult time measuring it. How do we get, and in the lighting industry, which was where I'm from, there was such a focus on the mitigation of carbon that lumens per watt became the only metric that people cared about. And then what happened is we increased light pollution at a rate of 10 to 15% a year every year for 6 years. And we also, sabotaged a whole bunch of other things in the lighting industry, like standardization and ability to maintain things and inter-brand compatibility with parts and all these other things. So this over-focus on, one crude metric, I think, causes a lot of problems downstream. Have you seen this in your work where we become obsessed with one or two metrics and kind of at the expense of all other things that are important?
Well, I mean, I would say that sensory pollution isn't even far enough for that sort of inaccuracy to have arisen. Like, I do a lot of work on noise pollution in addition to light pollution, and agencies don't even understand the metrics, let alone having
Hmm.
agreed upon one that is something that there should be movement around. And light is quite similar, and as there's all different kinds of ways you can measure light and different ways they might be having impacts on wildlife. But no, yeah, I haven't noticed that yet, in at least in the wildlife sort of side of things.
It's interesting that you mentioned sound. We often, we could call this podcast "Restoring Silence," and it would be very similar. The two seem to go together. I live in the country, and you know, because I live in a rural area, I'm aware of how loud cars are. When a car comes down the road or a truck comes down the road at 80 kilometers an hour, it will wake you up from your bed at night. That's how loud it is. And if you live near a highway or these areas, these things are extremely loud. Um, how do you actually measure that piece of the sound when it's in a natural environment? You just take out a decibel machine and measure the decibels of steady humming drones that come from civilization, or what? How exactly do you do it?
Well, so we use long-term deployed equipment. So you can think of light in similar ways, that you might have lights that come on at different times of night, and as the natural light environment changes, the influence of artificial lights is different. Is
Hmm.
influencing the overall lightscape differently. And the soundscape's the same way. So if you take a snapshot measurement, you're never going to really understand it. You have to integrate over days, weeks, and months until you actually know the footprint. And acoustics is undoubtedly more variable than light, but they are co-localized often, right? When we think of
Hmm.
urbanization, we think of light and noise, but they are decoupled in a lot of places in the United States, at least, and likely globally. We've done some analyses, some of my collaborators and my lab, on looking at bird fitness in relation to noise and light pollution.
Hmm.
And this is done with a continent-wide citizen science data set from Cornell, the Nest Watch program.
Hmm.
So if and this is it's a program where people watch birds in their backyards, and they note down, when did they lay their eggs, how many hatch, when did they hatch, and we can use those kinds of metrics and link it up with larger measures of light and noise pollution. But you could not disambiguate the two. You could not tell the independent contributions of noise
Hmm.
and light if there weren't places in the country where they occurred alone.
Hmm.
So there are lots of highways that are not lit. There
Hmm.
are lots of natural gas extraction fields that are using compressor stations to pump resources out of the ground, that are not lit. And then there are also lots of places like highways that are lit, even
Hmm.
when there's very little traffic or no traffic.
Hmm.
And so you've got these places where you can pull apart the independent effects of light and noise.
What do you know about the effects? Like, and I'm assuming that yeah, of course, there's only negative effects to these, the light pollution and the
Well,
sound. Or, I mean, we have the positive. Like, listen, I'm not against electric light at night. I think we need it, and I'm in the lighting business. I sell lights every day, so I'm not
yeah,
against electric light. I'm not negative on the lighting industry, but I think we could do better. So,
yeah.
what are some of the
Well,
consequences? Or yeah.
yeah. I mean, I kind of am negative on the lighting industry. I mean, I mean, I think pushing light for profit is, the name of the game, and that, it's not new to any industry, and it's how the capitalistic model works. So, but the lighting industry has been preying on the human psychology of wanting perceived safety and perceived increase, ability to do things, without actually understanding if those things are real and doing the research necessary to know what kind of lighting we need. More light is, better, is the frame that
Yes,
they
and
work
whiter
with.
light is better, and the more uniform it is, the better. There's all
Right.
manner of presuppositions which are entirely unproven or just flat out incorrect. Um, But I'm gonna push back on you on the capitalistic model because the darkness restoration movement represents the single largest opportunity for making money in the lighting industry. Um,
Hmm.
a lot of people, I'm trying to convince them that the lighting industry has been staunchly against this movement for a long time. They were at odds with the IDA. They wouldn't talk to each other. They wouldn't have conversations. But what strikes me as odd is that, guys, if we start doing this, it means a lot more lights, and that every outdoor light on every building is basically needs to be removed and replaced. Why would we possibly be against something like that?
No, I 100% agree, and I work with industry partners in that direction. I was simply referring to how did we get here? How did we
Oh,
get
right.
to this place
Sure.
where we have massive amounts of blue LED lighting all over the place? Um,
I know how we got here. I can tell you the answer to that question. Very
well,
simple.
tell me.
Yeah. So what happened was about the invention of white light LED and its efficiency. We got caught up in what do they call um, an irrational kind of hysterical situation where the industry began projecting all sorts of false claims. Um, you know, uh, like the LEDs last forever,
Mm.
or you'll never have to remove you do your municipal 29,000 municipal streetlights, and you'll never have to change one of them again or maintain one of them again. And everybody drank this Kool-Aid from about 2013 to maybe 2018. That was
Mm.
total irrational. On top of that, there was like a Silicon Valley sort of attitude about it, move fast and break stuff, and this creative destruction sort of idea out of venture capitalists in California kind of entered the lighting business. The business needed to be disrupted. And unfortunately, it's not like replacing your BlackBerry and your Palm Pilot with an iPhone. This is critical infrastructure. It has massive impacts on all sorts of different things. And then enter in the climate change movement with their consistent desire to mitigate climate change using the lighting industry as its key place to save energy. The lighting industry is the only industry that saves energy consistently year after year, reducing wattage and improving performance. And this predates LED. It goes back to T12 to fluorescence to T8 to T5, then transfers to CFLs, and then constantly chasing efficiency. And so the
Mhm.
lighting industry has been used as the place to create efficiency through incentive programs and all this. Enter LED in 2013. You set up accreditation agencies that are now labeling products with different labels for their efficiency, and you set up all sorts of incentive programs. And the industry
But why is that
becomes
why is
focused
that
on
efficiency?
one single thing,
But why
which
has
is
that efficiency been pushed?
because the
I mean,
lighting.
it's
Why? Because that's a good
well, I
question.
mean, I'm not an economist. I'm a
Sure.
biologist. But it seems to me that you're trying to sell new products. This is going to save you money. So
Yeah.
underlying
So
all of it
the
is a capitalistic
American
base.
no, the American. I wouldn't say that totally. I think there is a desire to make money. But what at the bottom of it is the American electricity tax person who pays an electricity bill, okay, has been having their electricity increased, and one of the reasons why the costs have increased is because what happens is the rebates are. Why would a utility pay you to use less of their product? Like, why would any business do that in a capitalist system? Well, what happens is the utilities simply raise the price of electricity to compensate themselves for the energy efficiency. Okay, so they take the rebates that they've been paying and the incentives they've been paying, and they push them out on the rate base and bill them to everybody. And so the lighting industry has been operating sort of being subsidized by the American businesses and people that pay electricity bills for the last 40 years. And it went completely on steroids with LED. And so you have situations in the United States right now where you can get your light fixtures for $180 light fixture for $1, all paid for by the ratepayers of the people of X county and this utility. And they take that money, they don't lose anything, and they spread it out on the rate base. And so when you have that kind of incentive in an industry, with the only metric that matters is energy efficiency or lumens per watt, what could possibly go wrong, Jesse? You know what I'm saying? Like you have an industry that is completely subsidized, but not by the government, not through taxation, but by people who pay their electricity bill every month. And so the only metric that mattered was energy efficiency or lumens per watt. And now we're coming to terms with the fact that we have all sorts of problems in the industry. And so whether that's capitalism or cronyism or oligarchism or, perverse subsidies or whatever, bad
All I'm
incentives.
trying to say is that people try to make money, and that's the way the world is set up. So if you have a new product
Mhm.
that is going to be better than the old product, and that could be efficiency, you're going to buy it. My grandma has this story of someone from the light company coming around when they just bought their house. Like, God, I don't know when this was, a long time ago. And they were offering free barn lights to be put on everybody's barn out back, and you didn't even have to pay for the install. These are probably mercury vapor or metal
Sure.
halide, and I
Low
remember it
pressure
growing up.
sodium or something. Yeah.
Big,
Sure.
huge, glaring. And this was a long time ago, and so why did the power company back then give it to them for free? So it's, yes, the game has amplified, but the game's always been the same: get the lights up, and then people have to pay for them. And
Yeah.
it's, yeah. So but I think we're kind of off topic, at least
Sure, we are a
for the
bit.
value of having me on the podcast.
Yeah,
And
sure.
that is that light is in general bad for wildlife, for sure. And that's based on much more limited research than what we can say for noise pollution. But we do know that it does cause some interesting advantages. So for instance, birds extend the periods of when they're active. So they
Okay.
forage longer into the night than they would otherwise, which can increase some measures of fitness, of how many eggs do they have. So how is that possible if unless there's some sort of kickoff or ancillary benefit? But what consequence does that have to the wider system?
Mm.
That is unknown. But same with noise pollution. You find some species that will tolerate living near loud places, and they benefit from living near those loud places because predators avoid that area.
Mm.
Okay, so you've got these sort of niche little stories about benefits, but the overall picture is bad news. That, but
So you're saying
paint
that
it as uniform
evolution
as possible.
evolution by means of natural selection works with artificial light and sound as well. If you kept that sound there for a million years, you'd have a whole bunch of new species that thrived with that sound and that light, and they would change the ecosystem. It like
Well,
that's
we
what
don't.
I'm.
Yeah,
It's
maybe
adaptation
some.
or something. It's like
You
adaptation
get
to the environment.
Well, what I'm talking about is extant species that are living now, and how they have
Hmm.
changed in response to what we're doing. In terms of what they're capable of changing now with
Mm.
their, let's call them, their ancient genomes.
Sure.
Now, is light pollution causing microevolution? Quite likely. There's some, preliminary evidence that it's reducing some moth species' attraction to lights.
Hmm.
Probably if you
Interesting.
think about it, the
Yeah.
attraction could be quite deadly, and seems to be from the few studies that have been done.
Hmm.
And then there's one study that indicates perhaps there's some microevolution. But then what are the consequences of not being as attracted to lights in the first place? Like, why are they attracted to lights? And that has consequences for understanding changing it.
Why are they attracted to lights? Not to get off topic again, but
No one really knows. I mean, there's the most I think attractive hypothesis that's out there right now is that maybe they use the moon as an orientation mechanism, and
mm,
that by keeping the moon off to one side, you can know which way to fly. And if you bring the moon down to Earth, then you can spiral towards it instead
sure.
of using it as an orientation mark. There's a new preprint out that argues that it might have something to do with flight control, of sort of orienting your body towards what was the brightest thing. And then
Hmm.
once you bring an artificial light down, you might orient your body towards that artificial light. Both of those hypotheses would cause the insects to spiral in, and which is
Hmm.
what you see them happening. But it's some sort of, co-option of an ancient mechanism that used to work.
Yes. Yes.
It's sort of like the sea turtle story, right? That we
Hmm.
know that they used to go towards the open ocean because it was the brightest thing. Now we have
Yeah.
all these buildings on the land, they go the wrong way.
But we love the turtles and we don't care about the moths, right? So that's why everyone knows about the turtles and not the moths. Isn't that
Oh
interesting?
my gosh. Yeah, and insects underlie all terrestrial systems. If they go away, we all go away.
We love the cute animals, eh? Isn't that interesting about us? We have all sorts of weird things humans are. So I've often said on this show, humans are not a nocturnal species, you know? And people, that's obvious to say that, but when you actually think about it, in some ways, we are also suffering the same effects as the moths are, or what have you. That light at night affects, the way we behave as well. And I think that there's a lot of evidence to support that. And maybe it's anecdotal or studied or not. Why bats? So in this movement, we hear a lot about turtles. But the
Mhm.
second most common animal that people talk about when it comes to darkness restoration as a kind of signal species is bats. Why are bats so important?
Well, I mean, they're incredibly important for pollination, seed dispersal, insect control, just sort of basic ecosystem services. But I think the reason that people highlight them for light pollution is they're, like you said, they're the cutest, furriest thing we can find that is actually really attracted to lights. But why are they attracted to lights? And that's only some of them are attracted to lights, and it's
Hmm.
because they're following the insects. There's a whole other group of bats that avoid lights, and everywhere habitat is lit is essentially lost habitat. It's
Hmm.
removed from their ability to use. So if you look at it that way, light is take. Which is a an Endangered Species Act term, that it is removing habitat. Nobody looks at it that way yet, but I think the literature is starting to mount that there are these bats that do not use lit areas. And then you got the others that are attracted to lights, and that's what people think of when they think of light pollution. But they're increasing their predation rate on the insects that are attracted to those lights. And the insects have all these anti-bat defenses that don't work as well around lights.
Hmm.
And in addition to that, they find themselves on the morning on the side of a gas station wall where their camouflage doesn't work against birds, where the
Hmm.
eggs they lay, the caterpillars or other larvae have no chance of making it to their appropriate host plant. And so you likely end up with insect declines related to light pollution, which then feeds negatively back onto those bats that are attracted to the lights. So at first blush, it seems like, oh, this could be an advantage to these bats. There's a smorgasbord of insects for them. But in the long run, I think it has a very strong chance of being negative for all bats.
They decimate the population of insects. They gorge themselves and then they decimate it. Um, uh, so when we were talking about the moths there a second ago, there was a point that I had, but I know from this show, and I can't remember exactly where I discovered it, but very low light levels are visible to humans, right? And that lighting is a spectrum, right? So there is non-visible light that humans can't see, right? Do we
Mhm.
know if bats and insects are able to, and I'm going to say, see these other spectrums, or perhaps darkness is not darkness to them? Maybe we're, when you think about their environment, maybe they can see, and I know that humans can see down to 1 foot, 1 decimal 1 of a foot candle or something like that. If, after your eyes adjust, is enough to see. Are these insects, like the bats with sound, are they able to see other spectrums of light? Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, so all insects and birds, and it seems essentially all bats have ultraviolet vision, and a lot of life does.
Hmm.
Now, interestingly, like the old light types, in particular metal halide and mercury vapor, have really strong spikes in the UV part of their spectrum. And that's why entomologists like myself use them to attract insects. So we go buy work lights at
Hmm.
Home Depot, and then, metal halide, not because of all that white light that they're spitting out, but because of those ultraviolet spikes, and that drags in the moss for us to study them. Now, once you start getting into LEDs, you've essentially eliminated UV from the spectrum,
Hmm.
and but the bluer the LEDs, the closer you get, and the more insect attraction you get. So the warmer you can make the colors, the less insect attraction. So that's why Signify Philips has developed these clear field red lights that are implemented in some protected areas and adjacent communities in Europe. And we are testing them and have put them in Grand Teton National Park in the 32 streetlights that ring the largest visitor center in the park, Coulter Bay. And they're a really narrow band red there's one white LED in the bank that gives a little bit of additional wavelengths there for marginal color rendering by humans, but way better than a monochromatic light.
Hmm.
And we are finding that they're really effective in terms of insects. They are attracting fewer insects, when not for all groups, but like, let's take moths for instance. Substantially fewer moths are attracted to those lights because they can't really see the red.
You know what's it's interesting that the assumptions humans bring to things, that we see this way, so everything must see this way. We hear this way, so everything must hear this way, or I can't hear it. And the world doesn't work like that. But you know, do we know anything about light? I've interviewed so many scientists, and they say that we're kind of like fish figuring out that we're in water with light. I mean, you have the absence of UV in LED light. You have the absence of near infrared in LED light. You have people claiming the health effects of light by matching, and I put quotations for those listening, air quotations, by matching saying that if we match the lux level of outside on the inside, we'll create these health effects. These are all assumptions. There's no evidence that electric light is anything at all like sunlight, other than the fact that we can see in it. That's like the bit we can see. It allows our eyes to see, but certainly there's something substantially different about sunlight than there is about electric light. Do you know what that is? Do you know what the difference is, and why we have so much trouble in this space of health effects?
Yeah, I
And
don't know. Yeah, I don't know any of the human sides of things. Yeah, I'm not very knowledgeable in that area.
yeah, I've been searching for the answer to that, because you have different angles. Oh, near infrared, it helps this. It can heal wounds and all this kind of stuff. It actually heals wounds. Yeah, like you put this near infrared thing on the over top of the wound, and it heals it faster. And then you have the sunglasses movement, where or sunscreen, and people should wear sunscreen. And then actually there's information coming out that, well, don't wear that much sunscreen, and maybe you want to take your sunglasses off and allow your eyes to create vitamin D. And so there's all these different, people. If you ask someone on the street if they thought sunglasses made you healthier, the answer would be yes. But in fact, it's starting to emerge that actually sunglasses are not healthy. You probably should allow the sun to enter your eyes, especially in the winter, so that your body can create vitamin D. And so we have all these errors in how we think about light, and the differences between electric light and light at night, and what we want versus what's really good. Do you think that we should advocate that the EPA of the United States declare wasted electric light at night as hazardous waste? Like something like that, like make a big move into that space?
Well, I guess what I could say is I think it should be declared as a pollutant for wildlife, and I feel similarly about noise. And it's hard to center wildlife because our regulatory industry of our country has not really centered wildlife ever.
Mm.
So it's pretty it's pretty difficult to make those cases. I mean, if you think about chemical pollution, things start to get controlled when they affect people. But the effects seem to be pretty, in lockstep. They're different kinds of effects, but when we see negative effects to people, we see negative effects to wildlife. Like the
Hmm.
circadian clock that is entrained by blue light in us is entrained in all mammals, and so there are these overarching similarities. But the what my work and the ecology field in general has shown about light pollution is that you can try to change the color. You can try to change the intensity and it will make things a little better. But in general, it just needs to be dark.
Mm.
That's the solution.
And it's interesting that so do you that's an you're going to have a tough time accomplishing that because
Oh, exactly.
it's very the our Christ is the light of the world. He brings the light to the darkness. There's all like archetypally light at night is something that humans like this. It's like the sunglasses thing. It's like the sunglasses thing times magnitude. People are very electric light at night is correlated with safety for them, whether or not it's true. If you have a legal case, for example, there's the case I can't remember where it was where the tunnel was so bright that people were having trouble eyes adjusting when they came out of it, right? And so accidents were happening at the other end of this tunnel because when they exited the tunnel, you're going from whatever lux it is in the tunnel to a much lower lux level, and particularly elderly people it took time. This happens also when people drive under bridges on dark country roads and the bridge is lit up under it. Or they pull out of a gas station, like a Walmart gas station parking lot, and they pull onto a darker road. The time frame of adjustment gets longer as you get older. And so there's accidents that are caused by this. But the answer is never less light in the gas station or less light above the bridge. It's always more light everywhere. Like
Right.
and if there's a legal case, the person will be sued because the municipality didn't have enough street lights. So the entire thing from every angle, from the legal perspective, from our spiritual minds to people's impressions of safety and everything else, is geared to more light pollution. And that's a difficult problem to solve, but the stated purpose of the show is to solve it though. But, that's what we're trying to figure out.
Well, yeah, and clearly the solutions for wildlife, will work for people too. As we push towards these warmer colors, you're going to have less of that effect you just described. And
Mm-hmm.
and that is why my lab is dedicated to and trying to find mitigation solutions. Like, even though I realize that quiet roads and dark night skies are what will protect wildlife the best, people are going to put up lights and they need lights. So we currently have a project where we're working across several Keystone National Parks, testing different kinds of lights, some PC amber, some narrowband red, and juxtaposing that against really low K white LEDs to see what are some of the functions that people can perform under these kinds of lights, and how does it affect wildlife, and where is that nexus where we can find lighting that is acceptable as possible. And one of the things we're finding is that spectrum isn't as important as you might think. It matters for sure, but making it less bright is really part of the key. And so, but then there you butt up against the human side of things again, because people want it brighter.
Hmm. I don't know if they actually do or not. So,
Mm.
I don't know if they do. So, for example, my old co-host John Bullock, he was describing how the richer neighborhoods in Britain are starting to change their outdoor lighting to be shielded, lower Kelvin temperatures, and not uniform. So
Mm-hmm.
the major problems with light pollution are higher Kelvin temperatures, really bright and unshielded and uniform. So you have your street is lit up like a gymnasium at night, so you could play basketball at night, full court, and it's spilling. And so we're starting to see, people rejecting light pollution, not wanting it to be minimized at the high end. It's similar to somebody buying a $20,000 flat screen TV in 1999. Is this going to move forward towards the rest of the population? So you had mentioned that, not that the most powerful metric is to reduce light levels or to turn them off completely when unnecessary. Um, do you see a future where that's possible? Like, never mind. Like, technically, I believe it's possible. Not 100%, but we have a lot of sensors. We have a lot of digital controls. People could have, turn the lights on to walk their dog at night using an app. Like, there is a way. I don't know if it's clear yet, but do you see that as a possibility, or are you hopeless about it?
Well, I mean, most of my work is with the National Park Service, and they are prepared to implement the,
Hmm.
solutions that will work for wildlife. With a their strongest mandate is towards visitors. So that
Hmm.
human side is still incredibly present within the national park system, but they are committed to protecting the wildlife therein as well. So I do think that especially with this infrastructure bill and all of the money that the parks system has to
Hmm.
redo infrastructure, that there's a pretty strong chance they are going to choose some what what the rest of the world might consider some pretty radical lighting solutions to try and protect those keystone habitats.
That's
Now,
what.
how do I feel about the outside of the park system?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
I have pretty negative hopes.
See, I see it as a 100-year issue. Like, I don't see it as something we can solve in the next 5 years, but we need to lay the groundwork for the next generation. That's sort of how, after whatever 50 episodes of Restoring Darkness, that's working in the lighting industry and actually seeing selling lighting every day to people and actually seeing how difficult it is to even have
Mhm.
conversations with people about this. Like, what are you talking about? I'm going to have less light. Why would I pay for less light? That makes no sense to me. If I'm going to buy lights, I want more light, right? Like that, it's almost, I'm telling you, it's very difficult to have these conversations. But, I would say that the movement starts with preserving night where it exists, like in the national parks, like what you're talking about. I think that, like, just having that mindset, preserving it where it exists, and then let's see if we can restore some darkness to heavily polluted areas and begin incrementally allowing night back into our lives. And that involves research, it involves regulations, it involves holding lawyers back from using lighting. Have you ever been involved in a lawsuit that involved a car accident at night?
No.
Oh man, they they start pulling out code books like this about lighting and everything else. So the lighting is very key, and if it's not an if it's presumed to be not enough, the damages go up against the municipality. You understand? And so we need to
Mhm.
get there's multiple aspects to the movement that we need to get under control, and one of those is the legal or the lawsuit side of it, and then insurance. If you have an insurance company and you have a robbery, they're going to tell you to put more lights on the exterior of the building. It's everywhere in our society. This proclivity to increase light as a way to mitigate against danger or sabotage or robbery or whatever. But we have to start chipping away at those things. And I think it starts with preserving night in the parks. And you know what? Maybe this will all happen long after we're dead, Jesse. But we have to start somewhere, right?
Well, and yeah, and I think the protected areas, whether it's national parks or your city park, are experiencing the same exact problems. When a light fails, the person in facilities is going down to the local hardware store and buying the thing that just seems the most logical, and that's going to be a 6500K floodlight that they're going to replace that old warm light with. So parks are not these safe holds of sensory resources that you might think they are.
Mm.
There's more visitor centers, more cabins for people to stay in, more
Hmm.
intersections where accidents occur. So lights are going up in parks too, just like everywhere else. So
Hmm.
we are losing it everywhere. And so, and that's why I think these radical mitigation solutions are necessary as a stopgap until people realize, well, maybe we could walk that trail with our red headlamps. Maybe we could just use lower speed limits to control accidents
Mm.
in this intersection in the park. But until then, if people need to have lights there, we need to find what lights are going to protect that habitat for wildlife the best.
I couldn't agree more. And that's where I like the word preserving, because you know it's actually, we're trying to keep these habits. I mean, the average American, I would argue, has never seen the Milky Way. I would, and
Yeah.
the average European for sure. I mean, there's much less access in. I'm a Canadian, but Canada is basically a dark sky country. Basically, the whole
Not where the
country.
people live.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Well, yeah, you're right, but
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to drive very far north.
Right,
I
right,
mean,
right.
Canada's like Chile on Argentina. You know what I mean? We just go right along the
Yeah.
U.S. border. But so but I'm not hopeless on it. But I think one of the major things the lighting industry has to do. You talked about your hardware store metaphor. Okay, so the lighting industry has become obsessed with product certification. Okay, so this product is, dark sky approved, or this product is DLC approved for energy efficiency. And we have to get away from the model of certifying products and get into a model of certifying people and companies. Like, if you go right now, Jesse, and you say, I want to do this, can you find someone that's dark sky certified? Or can you find someone that has a certification from, this university in applying and restoring darkness? I don't think that exists.
Yeah, I've never heard of it.
Right? And so the industry has done a very bad job, because that wouldn't be a degree from a university. That's an industry certification, right? It's like the LC, lighting certified. There should be a darkness certified as a counteraction to that, so that people like yourself and other institutions and parks and these types of things have a resource they can call upon with somebody that they know actually knows what they're talking about, and has a certification that they can point to that is indicative of some level of knowledge and expertise of applying, and is looking at an environment from a perspective of applying darkness to it rather than just lighting everything up. And so the industry has done a very, very poor job on that. And, there's no, I don't know of any programs right now that are actively being created to address that. But we have to get away from this product certification, because a product can be misapplied, even if
Well,
it
and a
has a
3000
certification. Yeah, go ahead.
and a 3000K white light is hardly dark sky friendly, even though it's certified.
Yeah, I mean, this is why product certification is never going to work. I mean, I still have light bulbs in my warehouse with CFLs. Now, CFLs went from being the symbol of energy efficiency 20 years ago to being the thing we want to get rid of the most. CFLs, they got mercury in them, right? But those boxes, they all say Energy Star on them, right?
True.
Right? The average, if you take a CF, there was actually, this is how bad product certification is. We had an article came out from my local municipality, Durham region, and they had this thing, LEDs will be this and that. It was talking about changing your house to LED. In the picture, the hand was showing a CFL. So the author of the article could not distinguish between a CFL and an LED light bulb, right? And they should not be expected to. And so this idea of product certification, it just downstream that those products last. They don't disappear after the certification has been updated or whatever. It has the same symbol on it, so it confuses the public.
Yeah.
And the public should not be responsible for knowing everything about lighting or dark skies or plumbing or whatever. The expertise is needed, and so I think we need to focus more on people, Jesse. We're coming up at that 45-minute mark. And
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed chatting with you. And sometimes I miss a few things that my guests would want to bring up. Is there any thing from your research or what you're working on that you'd like the Restoring Darkness listenership to know about before we sign off?
I mean, I guess the one thing that I'd like them to know is that the Natural Sounds and Night Skies Division of the National Park Service exists. And it
Beautiful.
is an entire division of the NPS devoted to trying to do their best to restore and protect sensory resources. And it's the only entity of its kind on Earth. And that's what we need more of on the regulatory side too, is government groups that are dedicated to understanding these problems, because you definitely need this industry side to interface with industry to implement things. But in particularly from a wildlife perspective, we definitely need some government regulation to understand how to protect wildlife.
It's interesting. I'm going to comment on that. Who was it I was talking to recently? Was They were making the point that regulations can actually spur innovation. Like a good set of regulations, that was communicated properly to an industry can actually create entrepreneurialism and create businesses and spur innovation, because it creates a predictive environment for the application of whatever products and services people might make to fulfill those regulations. And so the
100%.
yeah, and so the argument was that instead of all this incentive stuff, instead of all this like carrot without a stick, why don't we try the regulation piece with darkness first and see how the lighting industry responds? Because, you know, are there incentives? Yes, but they're kind of soft right now. If there was some good regulations, even if it was just for national parks, there's a lot of national parks in the United States. It's a huge country. Same with Canada. I mean, Canada's national parks are probably the size of Europe. I mean, I don't know. It's at least the size of France. You know what I mean? And so there's a lot of parks in Canada. And if there was some good regulations that stipulated, hey, we don't care what you do, this is the maximum light level, this is the color temperature, it has to be shielded, has to be controlled using this, whatever. If there were some solid regulations, you would see the emergence of companies that would respond to those regulations. And
Well, yeah, and we're partnering with Signify Philips right now for that reason, that they're willing to do the R&D and develop these lights that we would like to test to see how wildlife responds. And I think part of the reason they're interested in it is there is a market.
yes,
If all the national parks replace all their lights, that's a decent chunk of business. But these parks can serve as great showcases for the rest of society. You go to a national park, and you're like, oh wow, this like low level warm light that's not
mhm,
very many places is nice and functional, and
sure,
maybe my community could be like this. We
yes.
need these showcase places.
And there are many. Like, I mean, Mont Megantic in Quebec is an example of a dark sky city. I mean, Flagstaff,
Hmm.
Arizona is another example of areas that have been, very successful. But these are a lot of times for astronomical reasons. Like, it's
Yeah,
astronomers driving the movement. And you know what?
totally.
I make fun of astronomers. I love you guys, by the way, all you astronomers out there. But I always make fun of them. Like, I go to I go to a telescope, whatever, observatory, once every 10 years, and then I look at those three dots in the telescope, and I say, oh, those are the moons of Jupiter, eh? Those three dots right there. That's crazy. Okay, great. So astronomy is very limited in its appeal to the general public. Okay, and most people would rather go to one of those crazy theaters where they're showing a video of astronomy rather than
Yeah.
actually look through a telescope. You know what I mean? And at the end of the day, I have to confess, like I have a telescope. I like to look at the stars. I prefer to look at the stars through binoculars, actually, lying in a canoe on a lake. That's, to me, that is the best combination of, both. Beautiful clear sky, nice quiet lake in northern Ontario with a set of binoculars, and I'll lie there for 2 hours switching back and forth. But most people don't have an opportunity to have that. So, but my final point on that, Jesse, is that, and this is where the lighting industry needs to really wrap its head around this and really come to terms with this. This is coming, whether it comes in next year, 5 years, or 25 years from now. This movement is growing, and it's going to happen. I think it's the issue of the century, but the lighting industry is going to solve this problem. And so
Yeah.
we're the ones that are going to sell the new lights or remove the lights or put the sensors in or and commission the control systems or whatever it is,
Well, yeah,
and
and design them, like figure out
design
how to
them.
drive these LEDs correctly. And yeah, I agree. It's all going to come from the lighting industry, but they're only going to respond if there's some sort of pressure on them, and regulatory pressure seems to be the way to start to me, because as you've been espousing, trying to have the average citizen be the pressure is, well, I think it's going to take a while.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And before I sign off, I'd just like to say that people have enough stuff to think about, folks. You know, they have their own lives, and I would say that rather than pushing everything down, and people are stupid, they don't understand all this kind of stuff that people say. People don't care what you have to say actually most of the time, and they don't have time for learning every intricacy of a CFL versus an LED or anything else. So it's time for the industry to step up on our end, and then of course I love what Jesse was saying about creating some really smart, solid regulations. I know a lot of I hate regulations. Bad regulations are bad and good regulations are good. It's a benign term. We need good regulations with respect to darkness. And I thank Jesse for his work. And for all you listeners out there in the Restoring Darkness world, we are so happy that you have joined this movement and joined us today. And, consider subscribing or liking our stuff on LinkedIn. I know LinkedIn has been going crazy for us recently with some of the articles and the news that we post on the Restoring Darkness LinkedIn page. If you want to stay in touch, I know Scott Wachter is scrubbing the internet every single day for anything related to darkness restoration and night preservation, and it goes up on that LinkedIn page. Check it out. It also goes on the restoringdarkness.com website as well, so you can go there and check it out. But LinkedIn's kind of sweet with the way it just comes up on your feed. So check it out there. Consider just subscribing, and also buy some of our merch. Restoringdarkness.com. Get yourself a nice Restoring Darkness t-shirt with the wolf howling. Yeah, it's pretty fun. My kids love that stuff. They're always asking me to buy more of it. Super cool. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.
Look no further for dark sky-friendly products than Evluma. Since its first product launch, Evluma has carried one or more International Dark Sky Association certified models. If your customer cares about light pollution, suggest the OmniMax with shielding or the AreaMax with full cutoff to reduce uplight and glare. Evluma, illuminating the pursuit of darkness.